in a place that I really love. I love Ohio. I did a lot of work in Ohio when I worked with the Trust for Public Land. So today I'm going to talk about trees, technology, and transformation. And just to give you a little more information about me and what brought me to here today, I actually grew up in North Carolina. But you can see I'm in a cabin here right now. We have a cabin on the New Mexico-Colorado border, and I've been living in New Mexico for the last 25 years or so. I started my career thinking I was going to go into healthcare, into medicine, and took a trip out west from North Carolina and quickly fell in love with the land out here, public lands, all the beauty, the vistas, the natural experiences in the West, and decided that I needed to pivot and really focus my career on that intersection of land and people and indigenous and local communities and nature. And, as I traveled around, I really saw a lot of growth out here, a lot of natural resource extraction and things like that were really taking over nature in a lot of places. I'm not against that by any means, or against natural resources or, the resources that we need to power our lives. But I really also wanted to make sure we were protecting the places that needed protecting the most, that were very special. So I went back to North Carolina and I got a degree in geography and planning from Appalachian State University. And my first job out of my master's program was actually teaching GIS. And I will say, some of you have probably had this experience too. There's nothing like teaching something to really, understand it in depth and also understand the great opportunities that we have with different softwares and also the limitations. And so I felt like that gave me a really great solid grounding to understand how GIS could be used in the conservation and restoration sector. And during that time, I met the Trust for Public Land. It's a national conservation and park organization. At that time, Trust for Public Land had 35 offices around the country, one in Ohio, and 450 staff. And their business was in land conservation, and yet they had no GIS unit. They had nobody on staff with a GIS license. They were literally using paper maps. And so I quickly saw the opportunity to build up the enterprise geospatial unit at the Trust for Public Land that really expanded to include planning, research, science, conservation finance, and we really use GIS across the entire business sectors of the organization. So that was a wonderful experience. I like to say there, I worked from the main streets to the mountaintops, really working with local communities, building what we call conservation, community-driven conservation planning tools to identify where conservation was needed in communities and where parks are needed. And then also worked more at the national level, building out, like, for example, the National Conservation Easement Database, the Park Score, which is a ranking system for city park systems across the country, and Park Serve, which a brand new version of Park Serve just came out yesterday, which is a free tool for communities to use to understand park accessibility and access and equity issues. So then I had a couple of years at the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy, really working with the intersection of data, policy, and related to land, water, and climate issues. And as Tom mentioned, now I'm the Chief Impact Officer at One Tree Planted. And so my job here is really working with our impact assessment and monitoring team to monitor the thousands of projects we have globally and make sure the trees are planted and that they're doing well, and then to measure those impacts of those trees. And of course, GIS is just such a great tool for that. So of course, everybody knows we're experiencing unprecedented times in history right now. On The challenging side, I mentioned earlier, I saw this firsthand even 30 years ago out here in the West. We're really seeing a disappearance of nature, a lot of human development, taking over natural places, and in some cases, not a lot of great planning out there to really help to protect the places that need to be protected. And, these places aren't being protected, of course, just for the sake of protection. They provide so many benefits to us, protecting our water quality. We'll go into that a little bit more. And we're also seeing, more intense climate change driven issues like forest fires. So living here, right here in this cabin, we had a forest fire just a couple miles down the road from here last year. We got evacuated and couldn't come home for weeks. And so, we had one of the biggest forest fires in New Mexico last year. So we're really starting to see more of those events, more frequent and more intense. Of course, hurricanes, flooding, all of those things that come along with the changes we're seeing in the climate. And then inequitable access to the outdoors. COVID really showed the world that this is a big problem that exists, not just in the United States, but everywhere. I mean, we all know we were kind of cooped up in our homes, and it was such a breath of fresh air, literally, to be able to go out to a park, go out to your favorite trail, get out into the mountains and hike around. And what it really uncovered is that, a lot of people in cities and in disadvantaged communities, especially, and even in rural communities, don't have ready access to close to home parks or the natural outdoors. So those are three of the sort of big challenges I see, in the conservation and restoration field. But there's also an incredible opportunity right now. So unprecedented times with the challenges, but also unprecedented times with the opportunities. So we have over $1 trillion in funding that has been created through these various sources: the Land and Water Conservation Fund, the Infrastructure Investment Act, Inflation Reduction Act, America the Beautiful, all based in Justice 40. And in fact, there is an RFP out right now for urban forestry, and they're providing over $1 billion in funding for urban forestry. And if you haven't put in your proposal yet, there's still time. I think they're due next week. But, they're really calling for municipalities, states, indigenous communities, communities to really, and organizations to access this funding so that we can get more trees in the ground, conserve more places, create more parks, create more green infrastructure and nature-based solutions in communities around the country. So I talked a little bit about those impacts that conservation and restoration brings to communities. And, a lot of people don't really know and understand all the benefits that trees and reforestation brings. So here's just a few. I'll go through a couple of these. So it might seem, very obvious, but, trees are very important to the air that we breathe. They actually absorb these harmful pollutants, and then they release clean oxygen for us to breathe. Water is so important too. Trees, you can imagine in a location like this that's very steep, if you didn't have those trees there, you would have a lot of erosion, a lot of debris going into the water here, into the bay. They really play a key role in stabilizing our soils, capturing that rainwater, doing that filtering and removing those pollutants, and then helping the water stay in the soil. And then, of course, in riparian areas, that they're really important for habitat as well. And then biodiversity, trees are just so important for that. And, a single tree can be home to hundreds of species, and not just, mammals that we typically think of. Like, I guess in Ohio, we have possums, like all, not sloths, but, all different types of species, from insects to fungi to moss and plants. And then trees also provide a huge social impact, and we're seeing and measuring this around the world. We're creating a lot of jobs with reforestation projects, everything from creating nurseries to plant seedlings, because you have to have a seed stock to be able to do big reforestation projects. And then also providing communities and families with agroforestry trees, so trees like coffee tree, coffee trees that shade coffee, coffee bushes, and trees that actually grow fruits and foods for communities. And those can also not only provide the communities food, but help give them a steady income for selling those foods. And then health, more and more studies are coming out about the effects of trees and nature on our health. They really help to, being in nature really helps to reduce stress and anxiety. And we're seeing more and more of that, with all of the stresses of the world. And then also more and more heat island effects in our cities around the world. As the temperatures rise, we have more heat, extreme heat events around the world. Cities are heating up too. And so trees can play a really huge role in our communities to help increase or decrease the urban heat island effect and increase our health. And then of course, climate, trees they're in the top 20 solutions for sequestering carbon and absorbing a lot of these harmful greenhouse gases. And, we've seen huge deforestation rates in the past. We're really starting to see those level off now, and we're starting to see more advantages from the reforestation efforts that are happening around the globe. And if you're not familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals that the United Nations developed and put out there, reforestation really impacts all of those goals, things like poverty, jobs, water security, women's empowerment. There are a lot of different goals and nested goals within these sustainability goals, and trees really impact all of these. And these SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals, this is just one type of a set of goals that communities, nations, and corporations are looking at and really making pledges to make these things better, like improving education, improving, water quality, improving livelihoods. And so these are really important, and we'll talk a little bit more about that and how we're using GIS to help measure these impacts. So reforestation can happen at a very broad scale. It can be a whole countryside, it can be very large scale projects, and then they can also be distributed across an entire landscape. So we're doing work in Africa where we're working with literally tens of thousands of families to plant trees across a huge region. Same in India, same in South America. And then trees planting can happen very locally too. So urban forestry is so important and has many of those same benefits we just talked about, but also those hyper local benefits that affect more people, because of course the majority of the people in our country and in the world live in cities. And so urban forestry can really bring all of these different benefits, and no better tool, than GIS and our geospatial data to be able to number one, figure out where these trees should be planted, where they're going to make the biggest difference, but then to measure those impacts. And for those of you who don't know about One Tree Planted, we're a fairly new organization. We're started in 2014 by our CEO, Matt Hill, and he really wanted to give people an easy way to feel like they could make an impact in the world with what was going on with climate change and biodiversity loss. So he came up with this $1 per tree model. And so that's what our model is. And we planted more, this month, we're going to surpass our 100th millionth tree planted globally. So when we started out in 2014, it really was just Matt, our CEO. He planted a couple thousand trees in a couple locations, and now we're planting trees all over the world. And You can see some examples here, like we're doing forest recovery in California, and restoration in the Andes in South America. We're planting trees to protect their watersheds because of the warming. A lot of the drinking water they get from glaciers, which have almost all melted in the Andes. And there's also been a lot of deforestation there. So it's, it's kind of a double whammy where they're not able to really maintain and absorb the water in those locations. So we're planting trees to help with that. And then in India, we're planting trees to help with coffee agroforestry, which I'm sure all of us probably think is very important. We need our coffee. And then urban forestry, we have an urban forestry program, and you can see we're working in cities all over the world for that, within that program, planting 180,000 trees. We're really going to expand that. We are working in the United States in over 30 cities, keystone cities, that we're going to double down on in the next couple of years to try to get their tree equity scores up to 100% tree equity in those locations. So you can see we've had a huge impact. So again, this graph shows starting out in 2015, actually, we planted 50,000 trees. And then just last year, we planted 52 million trees. And again, we're going to surpass 100 million just within the next month or so. So that's a lot of trees. And, there's a lot of scrutiny on our reforestation sector. You've probably seen that in the news. And, we really want to know how do we know it's working? That, we're planting all these trees everywhere. How do we keep track of them? How do we know those trees are planted, they're surviving, they're thriving, and they're offering and providing all of these various benefits to communities? So that's where I come in. That's my job. That's my team's job. We're working with partners all over the world. We have over 600 planting partners around the world. And we're also working with other organizations like World Resources Institute, World Wildlife Fund. There's so many organizations working in this space, and we're really partnering with them to help advance restoration and reforestation, but also to improve our monitoring of these projects and reporting and verification. So you probably heard of MRV. That's kind of becoming a buzzword in the whole reforestation field, and digital MRV in particular. So it used to be that you had to go and visit every single project site, do actual measurements of trees, take photographs on site. And we still do all that, but there is a real place for technology to come in and help us do even more rigorous monitoring. And as you can imagine, some of these trees are planted in locations that are almost all but, impossible to reach on foot. And obviously, the planters do go there, they plant the trees, but to be able to monitor them, we need to use technologies like drones and satellites to be able to see those trees. We're also working with partners to get geotag photos when those trees are planted, and then to be able to monitor those year after year. And also, the technology is one piece of it, but as I mentioned, the partnerships are so important. If you don't have great partnerships, and especially with the communities on the ground, your reforestation projects probably aren't going to be successful. So partnerships are really important. And also process. We spend a lot of time thinking about how are people going to capture the geotag photos over such large areas? What are the sort of processes and techniques that we should use in those areas for capturing the data that we need? So these are the focus areas that we are doubling down on. We're really trying to make our self-reported data from our partners in the field, that process as easy as possible. So there's a lot of automation and synchronization that we're doing there with geospatial data and technologies. We're expanding our drone and satellite imagery program. I'll talk more about that in just a minute. We are enhancing our data infrastructure. So as you can imagine, we have thousands of projects across the globe. We're literally getting in tens of thousands of data points, GPS points, KMLs, shapefiles, geotag photos, drone imagery, and all types of other co-benefit data around these projects. And so we have built out a really robust enterprise GIS system and data infrastructure. And we're also working on different ways to tell our story and the impacts through reporting capabilities. And we're just starting to get into some of these emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning, so that we can use those technologies on our imagery, for example, to pick out the number of trees that were planted. And then we can take that imagery again in 6 months or a year or 3 years and really see, what the survival rates are and what some of those different environmental benefits those forests are bringing. And I talked about those co-benefits, in the past, in the conservation world, it was always said that, we focused our impacts on acres protected and dollars spent. It's kind of similar in the reforestation world where, the impact measurements have been number of trees planted and dollars spent. And so we're really expanding way beyond that now because we know that these projects bring all of these different benefits for people and nature across the globe. And so we are measuring those things both using geospatial and other types of technologies, and then also getting self-reported data on these different benefits from our planting partners. And like I said, we have over 600 planting partners around the world. We have a really great relationship with them. We vet our planting partners, and we also help to build their capacity. And so we can have a lot of confidence in the data that they're reporting to us. And of course, community, it's all about community. You can plant trees, but unless the community understands the importance of planting the trees, the value the trees are going to bring to them. And, we're also working with them because they have that deep collective knowledge of place. They have a deep collective knowledge of the type of tree or trees that are going to survive there, how to plant them, and how to care for them. And so engaging the community is, our work wouldn't be successful without that. So I mentioned our self-reported data that we get from our partners. And so one of the things that we're doing now is we're working on refining those requirements for monitoring data. I mean, you'd be really surprised. I was surprised when I came on board in this position, just how difficult it is to get KMLs of tree planting sites from people around the world. I mean, you can imagine, I always think of it as a bell curve. There's probably 10% of our planting partners who don't have access to technology. They're not technology savvy, and that's probably not going to change for a while. Then on the other side of that bell curve, you've probably got another 10% or so that are very technical. They have GIS, they have drones, they have a lot of access to technology and the expertise there. But then there's this huge continuum in the middle, that bell curve of 80% of them that are all across the board. Some of them might have GIS, some of them might have a smartphone, with an app that helps them create a KML or a shapefile of their planting area. So there's just a varying degree of access to technology and expertise in that. And so what we're really working on is helping to build their capacity and also creating sort of baseline set of requirements for these different planting sites. And so that's one thing, the process. And then how do they get that data to us? That's another challenge that we're working on. And then we're also developing that the data, the syncing of databases, whether they have a database that we can sync to, or we have a bunch of different data systems internally and with our partners too, like WRI, that we're working to sync up to make data transfer as easy as possible. So a lot of streamlining, self-reporting data issues that we're ironing out here, but it's a fun challenge to have working with our partners across the globe. One of the things that is also very important, we talked a little bit about the community engagement piece. We send our project managers, we have 30 project managers around the world. They have their different regions of the world that they focus on. They do site visits, a lot of site visits to go meet with their planting partners, hear, what their challenges are. We actually do a lot of capacity building and technical assistance when we're there on the ground. We teach them how to use apps, geospatial technologies if they're interested in that. And then also can provide them with drones, for example, so that they can do some of this monitoring for us and provide us with that data. So last year, we visited 47 of our partners, 18 countries, and gathered just a ton of data and information and really help them to figure out how they're going to do that too, really empowering them to do that themselves. So our drone program is really important. Drones are ubiquitous around the world now. And some places you can fly drones and some places you can't. But everywhere where we can fly drones, we want to capture that imagery because we found it gives us such a great baseline with orthomosaics and 360-degree photos before planting, immediately after planting. So again, that's where we can get into using AI and machine learning to count trees and, kind of sort of creating those baselines that we can use way into the future to see, how well these trees are doing 3 years, 5 years, 20 years down the road. So we're building out a drone program. We're training all of our internal project managers on how to use drones. They're all getting their drone license so they can fly the drones in the countries where they are. And then we're also doing that for our planting partners as well. And we found that, when we put these technologies into the hands of our planting partners, they really want them. They're eager, most of them, to have access to this technology that, they can really use the technology to do much better job at managing these reforestation projects into the future and doing adaptive management. So if they're seeing some trees are dying, they can try to use this data and technology to try to figure out why that's happening and then really do inform that adaptive management into the future. So here's just an example of a 360-degree drone image or drone video, so you can zoom down in and see those holes there. Those are the different planting holes in this location. Trees haven't been planted yet, but again, it gives us a sense of the landscape here, and then also gives us some real data on the tree planting site. Here's another one. This is Costa Rica. This is a before, 1 year after planting. The trees went in. So we took one image, and let me play that again. So this was like 1 year after the mangroves were planted, and this was 2 years after. So you can really see the difference here with this imagery on how the trees are growing and how well they're doing. And I love this shot too. So our colleagues were out there with a drone to capture this 360-degree image. So again, you can see how you could use machine learning and AI to really get some counts on these trees, especially right after they're planted. And this is a great example, good case study of a project where you can see trees on the other side of the road and no trees here. This is a corridor down in Costa Rica where there's been a lot of monkey, and other type of animal fatalities on this road because they don't have the canopy to move through. And so this project's going to really help with biodiversity and habitat connectivity. And we have an exciting partnership we're kicking off with an organization called Vets to Drones. It's an organization that's working with veterans that are coming back from their service. And want to get into the industry, but they don't have training. And so this program is designed to, with a curriculum to train veterans on how to use drones and UASs, and then get their license, their 107 certificate and license. And then they're working with us because they have to get 50 hours in the field to complete their certification and to get their license. And we have created a Veterans in the Forest program with Vets to Drones, and they're going around the country and capturing drone imagery, creating orthomosaics, and doing some analysis on that imagery for us for our projects. So really excited about that partnership. We're also doing a lot of monitoring with satellites. These are some of the different data sources that we're using. Some of the commercial and public data sources are listed here. And, we really want to be able to get the highest resolution data that we can so that we can start to monitor these reforestation sites beyond year 3. Because generally when you plant a tree, it's a seedling, and it's usually about, it can literally be a couple inches tall. And you really can't see that in satellite imagery. I mean, some of it's getting higher resolution where you potentially can, but a lot of these seedlings too are planted in places with a lot of other, brush or bushes or grasses. So it's really hard to see them with satellite imagery or drone imagery until they're about 3 years old. So depending on, where you are, like in Costa Rica, those trees grow a lot faster than they will in the Andes, of course. And so for some pine trees, for wildfire reforestation, it might take 10 years for the tree to get to 3 feet high, which is about when you can start seeing them with satellites. But we're really building out our satellite program now so we can use that data to track trees well into the future. We're working with Upstream Tech. We're using their Lens product, which allows us to drop an area of interest or a polygon and then choose the best imagery that's available for that particular location. And then they do some analytics so that we can see things like, actually we can just visually see that trees have grown here. This was a wildfire restoration site where we planted a bunch of trees, and you can see that tree growth there. And then we can also get access to different analytics, looking at vegetation indices, moist soil moisture indices, all types of different data points that we can get from the Upstream Lens Tech platform. And then, of course, by using GIS and having our own enterprise system, we can create our own data-driven support products. So the map in the bottom shows those different regions that our project managers are focusing in on. We're really starting to develop more story maps and different applications for different uses around the world. And for urban forestry, there's so many data sets out there. I'm sure all of you feel this way too, but I feel like every week there's like a tidal wave of new data coming out or new tools. And, they all have their specific purposes, but there's always for us, and I think for many organizations, there's going to be a need to be able to pull out certain pieces of those data so that we can do our own analysis. So we're using the best available authoritative data to understand, where trees should be planted, both in urban forestry and large-scale reforestation projects, and then to be able to use that data as a baseline to measure impacts moving forward. And then we're using community analysts in the ArcGIS stack to look at in the urban areas where we're planting trees and how many people we would be affecting within a 10-minute walk or a half-mile buffer of those locations and who those people are. So, a lot of this funding that's coming out is you have to be working in disadvantaged communities to be able to access this funding, and you have to prove that you're doing that. And so GIS is just such an important tool for us to be able to tell that story and to make the case for funding in these different locations. So how are we tracking our tree planting? We have a lot of donors. We have donors, individuals that come to our website and literally give us $1 to plant one tree. We have some donors that give us, tens of thousands of dollars, and we have a lot of companies that want to meet their sustainability and climate goals and pledges that are coming to us and supporting our projects around the world to help meet those pledges. And they want to know, where their money's going, where those trees were planted, and how those projects are doing. So we've created a donor portal, and it's a mix of using ArcGIS Experience Builder. We're including some dashboards, some story maps, and some other technology into this dashboard. So a donor would come to the dashboard, they'd log in, and then they'll scroll down through the first page. It's more of a storytelling or scrolly-telling experience. So they can see their map, high-level map of their projects that they've supported across the globe. They can get some statistics about those projects, how much in donations they've contributed, how many hectares were restored, and then other quantitative information about species benefited, jobs created, women involved, families benefited, volunteers engaged. So a lot of data we're pushing out through this impact portal. And then we also capture a lot of other types of media assets. So you can see here, we have a YouTube video down here about this project in Costa Rica. And so this is a great place to bring together all of those different communications and marketing assets. Then they can go to their projects page and see their entire portfolio of projects that they've supported. They can look at this by region, country, state, project type, year, status. So we have a bunch of different filters that can help them drill down into exactly what they want to see. And then they can click on individual projects and get information about those projects. So here's that corridor project I mentioned in Costa Rica, the Ridge to Reef Restoration, which has many different planting sites within this project. So you can see one with the mangroves going down into this water area. And then this is that corridor I just showed. And in the dashboard itself, you can click on this and it's that same 360-degree video. So you can actually, the donors can actually get, a firsthand experience of the planting site and a lot of information about what's going on there. And if you're more of a map person, there's a map tab, so you can interact with the data that way. You can zoom down in to the map there. You can search for different projects in the left pane. And then we also have a story map that talks about monitoring and why it's important and how we do it, how we gather the data. And we're trying to be, as transparent and accountable as possible, and give everybody as much information as we can for that transparency of these reforestation projects. And again, we have so much media. We're pushing out through, all these different social media channels, but the donor impact portal is such a great place to really bring those different assets in, and vice versa. We can have some of our YouTube videos referencing our donor portal. And so it's just a great sort of melding of geospatial technologies with other traditional comms and marketing assets. So that's a little bit about what we're doing with restoration, and I'm really excited to hear your thoughts and questions. And Tom mentioned I wrote a book called Protecting the Places We Love. And I just wanted to let you know that, I really wrote this book for us as professionals, because a lot of times we tell people what we do and they just don't get it. Or maybe we're working, for somebody that, our supervisors that still just don't get how powerful GIS can be, and, helping with all the different aspects of the businesses and the organizations that we work in. So I really wrote this book to be an accessible guide for professionals and supporters In this case, I'm focusing on conservation and protected lands, but it really can go across any sector. It gives some very high level explanations of mapping. What does it mean to model and analyze, do analysis? And then how do you engage communities, build strategy, support policy and advocacy, and more. So I think it's a really great book for people who don't really understand GIS, but they want to learn more and they want to figure out how to use it strategically within their organization, city, county, company. So yeah, it's available out there through your favorite bookseller. And so with that, Tom, I would love to take questions, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Well, again, I want to take the opportunity to thank you. Very inspiring presentation. Truth be told, I actually saw Breece in Boise. That kind of rhymes, doesn't it? But I thought the presentation was inspiring and wanted to bring Breece here to talk. Plus, we're doing a number of things in urban reforestation here in Northeast Ohio, and I'm pretty sure that some folks are that are on the call today. Please, if you have questions for Breece, put them in the Q&A session or section. I will read them, or Breece can as well. I believe if you have that up. But the first question I have for you, and as being host, I get to go first. So you talked about the impact of the social impact or human impact and things like that. Is One Tree Planted actually quantifying the benefits of knowledge transfer, what One Tree Planted is doing with the partners to educate and train them in technologies, and understanding that that's sort of as a seed, no pun intended, to grow their use of technologies in other areas outside of even what we're doing with One Tree Planted?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. That's a really important point, that we're building the capacity of these partners, not just to work only with us, because we know they work with so many other organizations or groups or their country even. Mm-hmm. So we want them to be able to use these technologies across their whole portfolio of work, because there's so much to do. We can't all do it individually. We do have a couple of large scale projects where we have been tracking those baselines for now about 3 years on knowledge transfer, what that looks like, and then figuring out how we can set sort of a framework that we can flow across all of our projects. And again, our projects are so diverse. Some, like literally one project in India that we're working on, we're working with 60,000 farmers across a huge landscape, and so really figuring out what those baselines are, I think regionally is going to be important. There's not one size fits all.
Right. And it's not even just in third world countries. I mean, there's probably areas in the United States too that you're,
Absolutely.
I know Appalachia, Ohio is a perfect example where I know that I've worked with groups down there that are, underserved, but technologically behind. And we've sort of brought GIS in those communities a number of years ago, but it's valuable knowledge transfer and resource availability. We do have a number of questions coming in. So the first one is how do you define the success with your project? Trees planted, square miles covered, CO2 captured, etc. What is the goal for 5 years from now or 10 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question too. And again, I've been on this job for 8 months. And so what I'm learning is it has been very challenging for this sector to define those baselines. And so that's what we're doing with World Resources Institute, World Wildlife Fund, some of these other organizations that are working in this space. American Forests is a big partner in the United States, and really figuring out what those baselines should be. And again, it's not going to be one size fits all. It's really going to be regional, country specific in some cases. I don't really think political boundaries. So I think about more of regions and watersheds and things like that we can set those baselines for, and then measure and track from there.
Why are the trees planted in straight rows? Looks less like natural forest. Is it because you're using machinery to plant them?
In some cases, we do use machinery in certain locations. But the majority of the tree planting that's done around the world is not done in straight rows. And in fact, a lot of the trees are interspersed with like shrubs, nitrogen fixing shrubs, or other types of undergrowth that help support the trees as they grow. So it really, really just depends. But yeah, that was just one example along that one corridor. But in most cases, the trees are really planted, in a sort of erratic fashion.
Do you work with ODOT or other highway administrations? I see a lot of open space between highways, byways in Ohio, but in Pennsylvania, they have a lot of trees between roads in certain areas. And I always thought there was a lot of wasted space that could be planted with trees. I'm sure it would help them save on mowing costs as well.
Well, I absolutely love that question. Currently, I don't think we are, but it is a big opportunity, and we're doing a lot of work with the Forest Service. Our biggest projects in the United States right now are wildfire restoration in the West and Southeast. In the Southeast, we're doing a lot of longleaf pine restoration. And in the Northeast, and we're doing work in Ohio too, a lot of riparian restoration. But that's a really great idea, something I'm going to look into. Awesome.
These are two-way conversations, right? This is great. Is the capacity is there a capacity yet via satellite imagery to track carbon sequestration in trees?
That is coming. We are actually working with a group that just got acquired by Planets. They're the biggest satellite company in the world, that has been testing some algorithms around that using satellite imagery to detect carbon sequestration, and even pinpoint individual trees and seedlings. And yeah, I mean, that technology is coming, or methodology is coming on really quickly. We don't have one, quite yet that we feel like is nailing it, but it's coming. I would say within the next 3 years, we'll have that at a high resolution and with high confidence levels.
Right. Cindy Rachel from USGS actually says, thank you for your presentation, Breece. Do you include climate change predictions in your project planning to ensure that your projects have longevity as growing zones change?
Yes. So, being a geospatial professional, GIS professional, yes, we are just beginning to do that. I mean, again, I've been in this position for 8 months. We did not have a GIS system when I came on board. So we set up our whole geospatial enterprise infrastructure. It took about 6 months for us to get our whole data infrastructure in place. And now that we have that in place, we're really starting to sift through that. We're creating sort of a state of our data report. What do we have? What's missing? What's good? What's not good? What do we have confidence in? So now we're turning towards doing analysis, and we were just able to hire 2 geospatial analysts, and that's what they're going to be focusing on.
Awesome. So expand the profession. That's great. Can you tell folks, that are attending how to donate? I know that last year I donated. It's $1 per tree. You can do it in groups of however much, but you can actually do $1, and you can donate it in honor of somebody or for somebody. And I believe at least last year there was a certificate that went to the person you planted it in the name of, that kind of thing. Can you explain? I know you mentioned in your presentation, but anything more to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to donate through the website. And yeah, to your point, it is a great gift to give somebody or to give in honor of someone. So you can donate directly through the website. That's probably the easiest way. We have a fantastic customer service group, that'll get back to you right away if you have questions. We also have some fun campaigns that we run, and like at Christmas time, we have these great sweaters, Christmas sweaters, that have trees and cartoons of trees and things like that. And, you can buy sweaters at different levels that plant so many trees. So we have some fun campaigns there where you could gift somebody things that also plants trees. We also do a lot of events with municipalities, with companies, across the world and cities to do tree planting. And one thing I didn't mention that I think is really unique and very amazing is we have a Players for the Planet program. Chris Dickerson, who was an outfielder for the Oakland A's, pretty great baseball player. He's leading our Players for the Planet program, where we're actually getting athletes, professional athletes from soccer, from football, from baseball, tennis, wherever, to pledge to plant trees for however many goals they make, or hole-in-ones, or whatever it might be. But also he really gets those athletes out to these planting events so that kids can show up and plant a tree with their favorite baseball player.
That's awesome. Well, that makes it fun. I do know too that for anybody that maybe is looking to donate, you can actually select the area where your donation goes. So I believe there's, you can donate the $1 for a tree planting in Appalachia. You can donate a $1 for a tree planting, and I know I did it in Idaho because we were going to Boise, but I think that's unique too. You can actually select, where it is you'd like to see those dollars go. So that's great. We're wrapping up here. We have 5 minutes to the top of the hour where we're going to actually transition, but to our next presenter, Wolpert. But Breece, I wanted to, again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for agreeing to be our keynote address speaker. Great presentation. If anybody has any questions, and looks like we have one, but we're gonna, Breece, if you could maybe go backstage and answer those questions in the Q&A panel, that would be awesome. Please go out to onetreeplanted.org. We also have a link to Breece's own website, where she actually talks about that book a little bit more and how to maybe get that, but more about her. So please go out there and visit that as well. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate it.